Yeah, we'll make a start. So welcome to the workshop in regards to, and we have got people all online. Hopefully you can all hear us well. They just have a quick, sorry. Right, that sounds better. Listen to my own voice, but that's okay. Can everybody hear us? Just make sure we're all clear on the online.
Yeah, I've got you here.
Yep.
Okay, I think we're all good there. So, have we got any apologies for the workshop in regards? No?
Alexa.
I will just duly note that. And if we can, well, at the end of the day, we'll just get on with it, and we'll first review the vision, and I'll hand it over to Russell just to bring us into this workshop and get on with it. That's all I think. That all good?
Good. Thanks, Mr. Chair. There are a couple of seats vacant around the table. Can I suggest that staff over there come and join us around the table?
Come and join us,
particularly for this discussion. Need to break up the Board District Council representatives so they want to say together. I wasn't being serious.
Yep. If you can just raise the ones online, just put a hand signal, or hey, Tara, you'll be looking. If anybody that wanted to ask questions or anything. Yes, all good. Yes, we're all good.
All right.
Okay, Russell.
Do you know who's around the table? Do you want?
Yes, Councillor Wilson's helped.
Right. All right. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So this workshop is primarily, it's been set up as a result of a request or a suggestion, I guess, a couple of RTC meetings ago, where you said that you wanted the opportunity to review the front end of the RLTP and to have something reasonably well set in place for a new committee coming in after the election, potential new committee coming in after the election. And the bits that we can, that we really need to look at are the strategic pieces at the front. We certainly won't be talking about anything to do with fund. We need to talk about that at this stage. So tossed up whether we get an external facilitator in to run through this, and then thought, no, we've actually got enough experience around the table. I think with a bit of luck, somebody's just logged in with it.
We've lost you guys now. I think someone muted the chambers by accident.
You're all good now.
I think we're back.
Okay, thank you for that. Just set up a little document so that we can run through things. So if you could bring that up for me, please, Dean. Let's do a PowerPoint to kick off. I want to just very quickly run through.
Good place to start.
Okay. So the next page, thought that it was worth just going right back to next page there. go back to, if you like, first principles. Set up what the RLTP is. And the fact that it has projects in it. And it uses the collective knowledge of the committees. So we're actually dealing primarily with paragraph number 1. Sets out common strategic transport direction to guide transport activities within the region, identifying and agreed a regional long-term vision, objectives, as well as the investment priorities. So we're going to start by looking at that. And as I say, given the knowledge around the table, we hope that we should be able to come up with something that will be enduring into the new committee. And we've got a couple of things that we'll introduce later and we specifically get talking about. So the next slide, please. So the intent of the workshop is to look at that 30-year vision, given where it came from, look at the 30-year strategic objectives, the headline targets, and look at problems, the problem statements that inform our investment priorities. Just to remind you, the 30-year vision is a transport and land use system, and we're going to bring this back up again in the next presentation. Providing integrated quality choices that are safe, environmentally sustainable, and support the region's well-being and prosperity. So that's 3 years ago. That was where we got to with the vision. Our 30-year strategic objectives revolve around road safety, asset condition, connectivity and choice, environmental sustainability, and have a future focus. And there are some words under each of those, whether the headings need to change or whether the words under them need to change. That's what we'll get into doing a wee bit of wordsmithing. The 10-year headline targets. We're under road fatalities to reduce seriousness and impact of road trauma, and the mode shift to increasing journeys to work and school by public transport, walking and cycling, around resilience, reduced emissions, and a proactive response. Probably the proactive response is the most, it's the least detailed of those. Those came from a facilitated workshop where we looked at the actually identified problems. We had 3 of them. First was a degrading and inadequate transport network is not fit for current and emerging requirements, leading to reduced confidence to respond to events and community needs. Second one was historical planning, lack of flexibility and misaligned levels of service has reduced opportunities for access across the network and increased congestion and emissions. Third one was integrated transport systems efficiencies, increase the level of risk to users, resulting in reduced resilience, poor health, harm, serious injury and deaths. So those were the problems that we then went on to click onto through the ILM process, and I don't expect you to read all of this, but as a result of that, we were able to come up with a list of benefits of addressing those issues, some responses and potential solutions. So that's, if you like, the framework that we are working at and that we're going to look at this morning. And the first, we're going to start perhaps at the highest level. And because we were looking for input from everybody, Dean is now going to magically bring up a different presentation that's in a Word form that he can take your words and put them up on the screen in front of you. Sounds good. when he finds it and the system works. And we start off with that. We'll bring that up a bit. Then can you get rid of the bar at the top?
Yeah.
The ribbon at the top.
And if you have any questions, just raise your hands and I'll try and keep everybody in order.
Sorry.
Due course.
That being the highest level statement, being our current vision. Let's just open it up for comment on what that's saying, appropriateness, changes that might need to be, what are we missing, etc. We need somebody to be brave and
I'll set you off. I think it's lacking planning forward rather than looking back, and it's lacking certainty of investment. So people just don't know really what, if it's a 30-year plan, what does that 30 years look like out in infrastructure? And that's where I think, if we're going to get some ticks for this, this is where I think you get the efficiencies. Reading it this afternoon's report on Southland's bridges, for example, if that was planned out and quite clear what those, 20% saving, if you had that industry body, that's $1 million every year that you might save. If you were looking at a real pipeline and similar design and things like that, I think we just have to get really clever about how the delivery is. I'm picking that figure up. Sorry, I'm making that figure up, but I think there's a lot of savings if we could do this better. And so be really clear that this is 30 years, it's not a 3-year plan.
Yes. I was just gonna add on, just add my 2 cents worth just right at the beginning, and I know I've asked Russell, I said, what do we know now that we didn't know 3 years ago too? In regards, we're getting a lot more data.
Yes.
And does this change the discussion? And it's probably like you're saying, trying to plan, we're getting more data. We can actually understand the situation. So how do we actually change maybe the vision to be a bit more clear on what we actually know? And I think we probably know a lot more, especially around resilience and things, that there are a few issues. But I've got Quentin online and then Murray after.
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking about just trying to speak to the consequences of not delivering what we need to. So I suppose trying to ensure that we maintain, a high level of service or efficiency, because my fear is that if we know that we've got a deficit, we're not achieving all of it. But if there's nothing in there at the moment that speaks to ensuring that it continues to work and sustain itself, and be efficient. So I don't know what the right wording is, but just conscious that if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to have a declining level of service, and unless we aspire to meet that need, then we're going to continue to fall short.
Murray.
Just speaking to Kate's point and the point that we just
Push
Right-hand button.
Right-hand button. When you're talking, just everybody do that, please.
just speaking to the points that have been made by the previous speakers, we've already got the word sustainable in the current statement. And Jeremy, you've mentioned the word resilience, and those to me are the two. That the sustainability needs to be expanded beyond just environmental in the statement, and the addition of the word resilience needs to be put in there. But in general, the statement, from my perspective anyway, it covers things quite well with those changes that we've just talked about. Particularly when you think about the changes in GPS that we've just experienced. I think the vision itself needs to be resilient and sustainable, because we are in that 30-year period, we're likely to have some quite significant changes in GPS during that period.
Chad?
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether after integrated you could put the value for money programs and choices potentially, which covers what I think Quentin was talking about. If you put value for money in there, that would, cover the making sure you're doing fit for purpose, cost effective programs and projects. And Murray's point around resilience, I think after sustainable you could have comma resilient in there, and that covers value for money and resilience, which I think is probably missing in the vision statement.
Thanks. Okay.
I think
Very-
just reflecting on that, the fit for purpose, that just resonated with me, that saying, well, it has to achieve its it has to meet its needs. So fit for purpose actually resonates to some degree. I'm not sure, I mean, value for money, I'm not sure. I agree with the point that sustainability needs to be beyond environmental. So I think that if we manage to expand that it's sustainable and environmentally responsible or something, but sustainability implies value for money because it's got to achieve it's got to be affordable if it's sustainable. Anyway, just thinking out.
Isn't it environmentally and financially sustainable?
But I think it's more than that. It's more than financially, because I think the sustainability has to run to functionality and efficiency as well. I mean, the whole point, the sustainability, it needs to say, well, like I said, we need to at least be keeping up with we can't have declining levels of service. We can't have decreasing efficiency in the network. So just trying to work out how to bring that.
Oh, I think we are. The challenge is I think some areas are having declining services, and we have to acknowledge that. And that partly comes from land use change, or less value
Well,
perceived.
remembering this is a vision, we can't have a vision that seeks seeks to have a declining level of service. That's not, even if it's a realistic component, you can't have a vision that is accepting failure.
Yep, I'll just have Phil, I'll make a comment after Phil.
Yeah, no, I was just reflecting on some of those discussions and the word resilient, and I'm wondering if including resilient might respond to some of those concerns, because it's resilient not only to whether it's the effects of volatile weather and climate change, it's resilient to changes in central government policy, resilient to technologies that may emerge and ask us to use our networks differently. So one point was, I think perhaps resilient adds something beyond environmentally and financially sustainable. So having that in there as an additional word may be a value add. The other thing I was going to ask about is right in the very opening phrase, it says transport and land use system, and I just was going to question, not challenge necessarily, but just question land use system and this particular vision, if we could understand what we mean by that, because when I read that, I reflect on a whole wider set of questions around land use, and often connecting to farming practices more than transport things, for example.
With that, sorry. Actually, to be honest, when you do look at it, I did have a look at the land use. Why is land use in the transport? What does it mean in this?
The transport system reflects what the land use is often, and so, but yeah, I agree. I think it should be, we should be worried more about connectivity of the and fit for purpose. It's Quentin's here perhaps then, but you also want no regrets investment.
Yeah, I think I was just going to make a comment on regards to when we talk about level of service. Our aspirations of what level of service are certainly different than 1950s and 70s of how we transport things. And I suppose Esther, I'd like to hear Christine's point of view in regards to obviously dealing with your bridges. Like we've got a bridge every 5Ks down the, access, got to have a bridge everywhere. And that was part of the society back then when you, I don't know, an area where two communities couldn't decide where a school went. Oh, we'll build they're build 2 or 5, 6Ks from each other, primary schools. There's no schools there now. So we have to accept that there is a point of saying we can't have bridges out every 5Ks. We make one good bridge every 10Ks, but you're doing that anyway, looking at the whole system. So just understanding what levels of service, and there's different levels of service. Obviously, the rural are probably depleting population in larger implements and trucks and everything on the road, but then you've got the towns and cities are increasing and putting pressure on their system. So there's a real change of what expectations of level of service from where you live. So I'm just trying to see how you can bring that in, but have you got any comments, Dean? I know.
That's what I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking more of a managerial term, I suppose. It needs to be both efficient and effective. I don't know whether that sits within the vision, but if you have an efficient, effective transport system that is resilient and providing integrated quality choices that are safe and sustainable, and then support the region's well-being and prosperity, because it is about enabling I guess the roading system to support the industry that's going on in the area, and that's problematic at the moment. But we want that aspiration in there, don't we? Which in turn supports the well-being of an area.
Okay. That was actually quite good. Have you got the written down, or did you pick up some of that?
It was only efficient and effective transport. That is resilient, and then it just finishes off with what's.
Speaking to the consideration of the longevity is now and into the future.
Yeah.
At the end. So we spoke earlier about it's not just a 3-year plan, but a 30-year vision. So, but you still have to recognise the struggles or the challenges today. Also, speak to your point around, I suppose, rationalising or changing system because of the needs now and in the future. Yep, just a suggestion.
Okay. Mark, sorry. Go on.
Sorry, mate.
Yep.
So I'm Henry von Sail from Gore, and I can use this opportunity to ask the dumb question and all that, so make the most of it. I'm just thinking from our perspective, transport, and if we have land use in there as well, I don't know around the table, but where is the transport operators? Are they part of this conversation? Kiwi Rail, are they part of this conversation? If you look 30 years ahead, should we have a financer in the conversation as well? Because we know GPS is going to change, and will there be a caveat for us and others to have that added to the process as we go forward? Because I think with what we've seen with the GPS, there might be some pressure on finances. And do we bring in a third-party financer to come and be part of this conversation and bring their 2 cents on funding?
Yeah, how to find the funds.
Yeah.
I think there's possibly not a vision. It's a really good point, but it's something that's a how-to rather than, yeah. Could I just add, I think I agree with the land use not being in there. I can repeat that, it's transport. But I'm wondering whether we need to talk about regional and interregionally. Because what I'm very clear about is if you're going to get South Islands into the South Island, we need to make sure that the Kiwi Rails, that it's got rail service across the Cook Strait and various other things. There's a whole lot of pieces to this that we have to make sure that's advocating sensibly right around.
If I can add, certainly Kiwi Rail's a big part of the frame and discussions between our region, and especially through the Gore, the railway bridge and all those things that come and always pop up. We always like to mention that and got that in there. So, but is anybody got any, I was trying to understand why the land use system was in play. Is there anybody that's against having that not taken out? Murray?
I would like to support the land use system being retained. The reason being is that the land use is critical in terms of planning, district plans and those sorts of plans. So, which are all part of ensuring that the transport system is optimised. So I think it's quite important that we keep that requirement that the land use system be contained within the vision.
We don't have any tools in our toolbox for that, though.
Well, things like there's some pretty critical land use issues like some forestry and quarrying, which put some fairly extreme pressure on our transport networks, and continuing to have the land use system in our vision gives us some ability to lobby from a transport perspective where district plans are being reviewed. So it's probably more at that stage rather than the day-to-day running, but there definitely needs to be some protection and thought about the consequences of various land uses on the transport system.
Yeah, I'm in two minds about that a little bit. I mean, I think the primary mandate, our mandate is around the transport system. So from that perspective, I'm happy to take land use out, but I would replace that further down by saying, an efficient and effective transport system providing integrated covers land use, well plans. And at the moment, we've got a duplication because we've got value for money and financially sustainable. So one of those needs to go, because I'm not sure which one, but I would say providing integrated, well-planned quality choices that are safe, resilient, environmentally friendly, financially sustainable. That starts to come together. It's not quite there, but it's getting there.
Okay, we're just playing around with that. I've got a couple, just Chad.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think integrated covers the land use component of it and things like bringing Kiwi rail in and that sort of stuff. So, efficient and effective probably means, do you need to highlight financially sustainable? Well planned is good, or fit for purpose choices. You could get rid of quality if you're producing an efficient and effective system. Yeah, so you could probably just type that up a bit if you wanted to.
Obviously, spatial planning has a lot to do with it too. Jim,
I just wonder whether the fact that we're talking about a 30-year vision, we actually need to expand our imagination and not get caught trying to foresee what's happening in 30 years in terms of where we are today. And so the more general we can keep it, because when we get down into the specifics, we actually come back to the tools in the toolbox today, and they won't be the same as what's there in 30 years' time. The other thing, and it doesn't belong in the vision, but I believe one of the things that's holding us back is tribalism. We're all here as a collective, and the more that we can work as a collective, then the more progress we'll make on any issue we deal with.
I think that's pretty evident. I mean, obviously down from south, working together and things like roading, and obviously 3/4 is major, but roading's a major issue for both of our provinces. So I can see that happening anyway, no matter what happens in amalgamations, and that we must, because it just don't have the ratepayers to deal with this. Ian.
I've got just a few thoughts on it. I think the challenge with visions is always they end up with this superlatively long statement of a whole heap of adjectives that sound quite nice. And they're all good stuff, but the challenge is to get it down to something that's pithy enough to really grab people and say you've got a point of focus. I think that I agree with the previous gentleman that the 30-year picture is something, and which is where Kate started us, that we've got to go actually, what do we want to say that we're aiming for in the 30-year space? I think there is something with this sort of the regional system within the national system. So I think I would go regional, national rather than interregional. And I think there is something around growth and flexibility. So I think that in the rural areas, yes, population-wise, we might end up with a decrease. In our central Otago area, we know we've got a rapid increase in that. But if you listen to Kiwi Rail at the RTC chairs, they said actually the South Island in 50 years' time will be the food basket of New Zealand. So the farming's just going to increase, which then comes back to Murray's point about land use. And I think that the statement as we had it around land use was wrong. I think the transport system should support effective land use, not, this shouldn't be, like, because Kate's quite right, we don't control the land use as an RTC. So the question is then whether integrated works within that. And that's about it. So I've probably interjected a whole heap of problems rather than giving you any solutions.
Well, I think remember land use goes both ways. So integrated doesn't mean that we are necessarily dictating land use, but we're responding to it. So, you know, we've talked a bit about, you know, ports and airports and various things, but certainly the patterns of urban growth and transport infrastructure, including ports and airports, are determinants of what we need to do with our transport network. So it has to be integrated in land use. But it's not necessarily, I think it's been interpreted as saying we dictate land use, but it's the opposite. We're responding to it.
Okay, Joe, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I agree with someone's comment earlier about we don't know what the future is going to be like. If you'd done this back in the 1920s, well, in about 10 years' time, you'd gone from majority horses through to the gasoline engine. So things on the future, look out for aerial drone delivery, which will take a bit of load off roads and that as well. So once again, it's changing backdrop as to how we move and service the area. I'm also aware of how many people we have in this group and the time we're spending on this. If you add it up, charging $75 an hour per person, it soon stacks up on a vision. So it really has to make sense and value for money.
Thanks, Phil, and then Russell's make a comment.
You know, just listening to this, and I was just wondering if some of the current sequence of words up there are getting in the road a little bit, and I'd kind of just sketched a slightly different version on my screen, and it reads, an efficient, effective, integrated transport system that is safe, resilient and sustainable, providing choices that support the region's well-being and prosperity. And I was just wondering if it's that thing about providing choices that support the region's well-being and prosperity that connects both to the issue of whatever land uses may emerge or change in the future, whatever technology throws at us in terms of transport options in the future, we've got choices that support our region's well-being and prosperity because we've got a transport system that responds to that. So I'm just wondering if at least moving that choices part of it, a little bit further on in the statement, so that it reads, providing choices that support the region's well-being and prosperity might be helpful.
Okay. Sorry, Russell, can you, while Dean's playing around there?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, can you pick up those words, Dean, and put them up on the screen?
Do you want to repeat it?
Do you mind repeating that?
Well, so it was an efficient, effective, integrated transport system, correct? That is safe, resilient and sustainable,
Let's say, need to delete.
Yeah.
That is safe, resilient and sustainable.
Sustainable, yeah.
And so providing choices that support.
Does well planned stay in there or not?
I didn't have it, but if it's sufficient, effective and integrated, that would reflect that it probably has to be well planned.
So, okay. Christine.
I think that covers the points I was going to make, because I didn't think we need to qualify what sustainable means. It's better actually taking those out. And I was uncomfortable with just the well-planned quality choices, didn't I agree as well, so.
Sustainable
Yeah.
covers all parts of being
Yes, it's
sustainable.
open to whatever it
environmentally
might be.
Resilient.
You need efficient, is effective by default, no? Efficient?
We are in
Not
May
always.
terms.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, but yes. Agree.
Not always.
You could be really good at delivering something efficiently, but doesn't achieve the outcome you want it to achieve.
NZO.
There are specifics, but
How do people view that? Any feelings towards what we've got there at the moment?
Should be and sustainable. Isn't it?
And
No, and before sustainable.
before sustainable.
Easy to read it without the other.
That's all.
I'm feeling more comfortable with that than the previous version.
Well, yeah, it certainly, I think I'm pretty comfortable with it because we don't want to be too descriptive of what
It doesn't necessarily,
covers.
yeah, anyone could have that as a vision. It doesn't talk to Otago and Southland any more than anywhere else, but it's still, that's not a bad thing for a vision. It doesn't have to.
And the safe, resilient and sustainable covers all the communities' aspirations as such.
Connectivity is the one thing that I think we do badly. We connect some things really well, but it's not necessarily at every level. And that's why we've got bridges that we've got the heavy transport routes aren't necessarily well connected altogether intuitively and stuff like that. But I'm not sure that it's a big enough problem to, at this level. Sorry.
Chair, I think that the fact that you've now got providing choices and well-being and support the region's well-being and prosperity. Actually, between those statements there gives you the option of actually looking at everything from changes in the way that we move freight, the way we move people. You've got the whole gambit covered. So, I think you're getting pretty close to that.
Okay. Is anyone online? Quentin, Joe? Anybody else there?
Yeah, that's looking better.
Look, yeah, I'm reasonably comfortable. I mean, the only, I mean, it does come down to interpretation, really. And we can, as long as we can cover off the sort of both foreseeable and unforeseeable changes. I still wonder whether, something about well planned or well, because we do need to seek to be strategic, and so something that sort of points towards being well planned, I think, is important. And like I said, just trying to and I still haven't quite got my head around it, but how do we actually, focus on meeting the need, ensuring that the need is met, if you like, and that we're not going backwards. We can take that, I suppose, as if it's it has to be efficient and effective. I suppose that's the fit for purpose piece. So I suppose that covers that off, but maybe well planned or something like that would cover off that strategic piece.
Yeah, I suppose the efficient and effectiveness is meaning that there should be some fairly serious planning going on, the well planning from my perspective, but
well, I don't think that, I mean, integrated maybe, but I think that, you can have something that's efficient and effective without being well planned. It doesn't necessarily follow, but it's, I just think we need to point to that looking, spending good resource on planning, forward planning.
no, point taken, sure. And then Kate, Murray, I might try and.
Oh, yeah, sorry, trying to drive this thing. At the risk of throwing another word at this, when you speak about levels of service 30 years from now, no one knows what it looks like. I've always liked the word appropriate. And maybe that's that same sentiment, is that things are changing. We don't know what it looks like, but always providing appropriate choices that support the region's well-being and prosperity, maybe. Happy to say no.
Okay, we'll think about that. Kate, do you want
to look at and straw men really. Prosperity, wondering in this day and age whether we should be talking about productivity. They're not one and the same, and it's certainly the language that's there. Prosperity can be all about us having money now, which isn't always the best long-term investment. And appropriate, what my problem with the providing choices, and this one going Hartley's point earlier as well, is that now or in the future, and now and in the future. I just don't think this has got the 30 years in there, and I appreciate that's hard to put in. It's in the title, but I don't think we've landed something that would give me confidence that we were really planning for 30 years with the statement. Sorry. Easy to pick holes, hard to find places.
Yeah, sorry, Murray and then Jim, we might have been and Chris. We'll have to sort of keep moving if we can in regards to this, but we want to get it right. No, Murray's good. Jim?
Just wondering whether we, if we accept the need for something to be appropriate, maybe we substitute it for relevant, because relevant is going to be right across the whole time span.
Christine? Yep, sorry, Jim. I'm just trying to soak it in myself.
Yes, I'm not a fan usually of the word appropriate. Quite often I look at a sentence, it doesn't add a lot to it. If you take the word out, it doesn't change it too much. But you've actually just put up there what I was going to suggest. But if we take out well-being, leave well-being and then take out prosperity and just put well-being now and into the future. Because well-being is about, I'm a bit concerned about the length that this is getting to, and we keep adding. But
I think it's going to be as short as the previous one.
Are we getting too descriptive, or are we? I don't know. If I'm just looking. I was quite relaxed with the.
I'd actually be quite keen to have Dean accept those changes and see what it looks like. If you just accept the changes, then
take out the comma.
Comma is gone here.
So if you feel that the words are reasonably close there, then let's put a tick beside that.
Is well-being enough?
I was just thinking the same thing actually, social and economic or something, because I think we do need to speak to that economic piece that will resound with the current government at least, but
Does well-being, I suppose it covers everything of person's happiness of the communities.
yeah, well, I suppose that it does, and at risk of going down the poor well-being's approach, the local,
Yeah.
bouncing back and forth, I suppose. But
Waikato actually use wellbeings, talking about the four in parenthesis to link it to those four wellbeings, just saying. Not saying I want to, but that's how they deal with it in their vision.
Interesting.
No, just to note that the four wellbeings are going to be taken out of the legislation.
I think they have, haven't they? But, yeah.
Going to be though, but just after sustainable, I don't think we need the comma.
Well, just to keep things moving, is we've got a general consensus that we're all pretty comfortable with that. Oh, Lorraine, sorry.
Just a suggestion, you could phrase it as support the well-being of the region's people and communities now and into the future, and that kind of makes it more around social and economic and
One person.
aspects. The well-being of the regions, people,
Which does bring it back to the
and community.
focus, doesn't it?
Yeah, it kind of also brings in health and safety as well as just the safety still there.
Okay. I've read this on too far, so
Does that then exclude business, people in communities?
it's the people who have the businesses, I suppose.
A part of the community.
Yeah. Any very quick thoughts?
I still wonder if you need efficient, effective and integrated, because I think that if you're supporting the well-being and providing choices, then you have to do that. But you can live with either.
The main thing's to be effective.
I think efficient and effective and integrated are very important, probably to be there. Yeah.
Right, the last input, everybody's happy with that? Not asking, I'm just saying, yes. If that's the case, if we can, we might move on. Are you just okay?
No, just because this was Cara, can we just put apology for Jim O'Malley? I'm sorry, he did raise
okay.
it was an apology to I didn't do it. Apologies.
Sorry.
Jim O'Malley, DCC.
Yes. All good. Chad, like last, but we'll keep moving.
I like Murray's suggestion to add businesses in there, so it's really explicit.
And community. And
Well, how about just regions, communities, and then you've got everyone.
What's, let's, given that this is going to, well, effectively, this will be a recommendation, if you like, from this TC. I have no doubt that when we have some new people around the table, they will want to revisit it. So I think that perhaps that we will give them the opportunity of looking again. So perhaps we actually take it at to the level that it's at the moment.
Yes.
And run with that, and perhaps a question for the likes of particularly Hartley and Murray, and I'm not sure any of the other district council people who are going to be looking at their activity management plans. How does this fit with those words in terms of the way you see your activity management plan? Is this something that you will can build your activity management plan?
I suppose this is, sorry, Harley, I was just thinking the last thing, or just from myself, is someone who knows nothing about anything about land transport reads that as it's very clear what we're thinking. Or very clear. And keeping it simple, you know, when you're talking about business, what is our community? Do people think, well, the businesses are our community, everybody's in our community, just trying to always bring it back to Joe Blogs on the street. Sorry, Hal.
No.
Yeah, you're.
Yeah, I was just responding. I think it does, because even as our existing activity plan stands, some of those words are already in some of the statements. You know, the resilience and safe already there.
Okay.
Anything else?
Anybody else?
Central Otago one has very similar words as well too, so I'll probably agree with you partly on that one. It is pretty aligned.
Okay. Well, if there's nobody else, you're happy, you'll give that a tick and move on. That's great. Thank you.
Objectives.
Right.
So from that, we have a road safety objective, an asset condition, connectivity and choice, environmental sustainability and future focus. Now, we did have a tag meeting a week ago with most of the councils represented at that. And there was, at that meeting, there was a general degree of happiness with the words, with the probably exception of the future focus. We just didn't think that, and it'd be fair to say that future focused was actually added in towards the end of the process last time. And we're now talking about, much as I would personally would prefer us not to become too GPS specific, the current GPS is very much more future focused and talking about longer term planning than we've ever had before. So that gives some strength to that, to us needing to do something around that area. So perhaps if we just
go down one by one.
Road safety, you know, changes to the wording, and do we need to change the wording? When we get to the end of discussing these ones, we will look and say, is there anything else that should be in there?
Okay. We're doing the first one.
Ask a question that I should know the answer to. Yeah. But in terms of our review, do we have measures of each of one of these that can tell us whether or not we are making a difference there?
Can I take a big deep breath before I answer them? The answer is not all. However, and here's a plug for the REG organisation that your rating manager is the chair of the leadership group on. Through Transport Insights, there is a much bigger data source and much better data coming into the system that is going to allow us, certainly in terms of road safety, we know how many people we've killed and how many people have been seriously injured. We don't necessarily know what interventions we've put in place have made a big difference. And it's probably impossible, other than on sections of the state highway where big capital improvements going. But in terms of, you know, asset condition, that data is starting to flow through. Most councils will have had that in some form or other, but it's never been amalgamated into, for example, a regional report. And you'll see that at our next meeting after the end of June, the first of the major regional reports coming out of Transport Insights will be able to talk to asset condition, talk to expenditure, etc., etc. So we are going to have that much better in the future.
I just think if we had these objectives in place, we must have some way of seeing that we are
take them on.
Yes, yeah. So that was more of a general comment.
Thanks for that. Phil,
Well, I did, but not on the very first one. I had a couple of comments on in respect of 2 and 3.
Okay, can we just work through? Let's just get tick ones off and move on, sort of thing, if we can. So from a road safety perspective, is there anybody's, Jim?
If we don't use these, the people online can't
Okay.
hear us.
Yeah, there are mics
Sorry.
in the ceiling as well, but
Right, is there anybody got any questions or any?
Well, only the free of death and serious injury thing is, you know, that obviously speaks to the Road to Zero program. I'm not sure. You know, there's always been a bit of debate about whether that's an achievable objective or whether it's just to reduce, you know, reduce or to provide a safe network, you know, or whatever. But I mean, it seems to be a fair objective, but it is fundamentally unachievable, which makes it difficult for KPIs and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It is one of those ones where might be aspirational, but we've got right cars driving 100k an hour past each other with no barriers. It's all going to be on. There will be deaths, unfortunately. Sorry, Kate, first, then Phil.
I'm waiting for Stuart actually to talk about this because it's one of his pet topics. But I don't have a problem with that remark per se, but I'm just wondering whether focusing on the high risks rather than on the low-hanging fruit that would make things safer for more people. Sometimes we're not necessarily looking at the right thing. There are a number of accidents that happen in some sites just because people can, yeah, well, there's a whole lot of reasons. But you're only.
It might be that you prioritize those things that have the greatest benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to the highest risk. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just putting it out there that sometimes we focus on saving people, and actually you won't get people using some areas because it a huge benefit, because we're never looking at how to make a cycleway actually connect to the next bit of cycleway, which would also make probably a lot safer.
Okay, just Phil.
Yeah, just on that, noting that comment about, you know, can you just deliver a system that is free of death or serious injury? An alternate set of language you may want to consider there is reducing harm and improving health outcomes. Could be an
Which
alternate
would be a much better focus.
So reducing harm and improving health outcomes. And that kind of speaks to both reducing smash, crash locations, but also connects to those who want more active transport systems, because that argument that can contribute to better health outcomes.
Then it wouldn't be high risk areas, it'd just be areas.
You can still then prioritise, I think.
Yeah, prioritise, but not, they won't be necessarily high risk. Sorry, if it's prioritising areas to create a safe transport system to reducing harm. Yeah.
Okay, Murray.
So just on that high risk, I personally think it should stay there, because risk is a product of both frequency and consequence. And going back to our vision, we're looking for being effective and what was the other word? Efficient. So we should be prioritising the high risk areas, because they are the places that are likely to be generating crashes or have a history of crashes. If we dilute it too much, we're not going to be efficient and effective. So that's my thoughts on that high risk issue.
From my perspective, I think that's probably, I'll probably spoil you there, Murray. I think that's, I do. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously that's where the risk, well, it's the highest risk that the harm will go along. It's conditions of driving, road types and things. So, anybody else, Hartley?
Probably challenge the high risk to high consequence, because if the risk could be there, but consequence, a high risk of a crash, say, happening at a site, but if there's no major consequence of death or serious injury, just could walk away, minor injury, but there's still a high risk of a crash occurring. Is it more the consequence? And that's a bit challenging maybe from a wording point of view, but maybe a different way of looking at it.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just chime in. I think
it's a good point. It's not about the risk so much in a long-term thing. It's about consequence. But it's also how we prioritise sites that are treated is by risk and by cleaning up what's happened. So we use that risk assessment. So I think priority maybe rather than prioritise. I don't know. It's a difficult thing to pin down because we as engineers take a different approach perhaps than the planner would.
Right. Is again coming back to someone on the street reading this, you know, like from the point, what's the best way to, you know, different words thrown there. I'm just trying to, I know we come from different parts. How do we, what do you want to do?
I feel that high risk is actually a term that is used across the country in terms of crashes. And the network, so therefore it's appropriate that it's there. And I think that the changes that you've given us now make it a better statement than it was, and less likely to be totally out of step with a future GPS. So I would be comfortable to run with that.
Well, if there's no
the
other,
next stage.
okay.
And Ian might have.
Just two suggestions on risk. What you could do is go create a transport system to reduce serious harm, improving health outcomes by targeting or through targeting risk, which then gives you the flexibility to look at how you treat risk on a corridor or a high risk location basis. And you could look at changing the title to be consistent with your vision to safe rather than road safety. Because I think it's by default, it's road anyway, but actually safe's broader for us.
Okay.
And Dean needs some help there.
Yeah. Where that, can you get that, Dean?
Is it create or prioritize? Yeah.
Wrong place.
That's much money.
Or create, sorry,
Creating.
yeah.
Safe.
Creating a safe transport system, taking out the two.
Yeah.
Reducing harm and improving.
Yeah, so take the prioritise out and creating.
Prioritisation anyway.
What to create.
I hate when people watch me.
Pressure's on.
Quite a few.
Targeting high risk, what?
Yeah.
High risk
Areas.
areas.
Okay, how's that grab people?
Just accept all those changes and see what that looks like.
While we're doing that.
Excuse my fourth form English, but it just doesn't read right to me that the to reducing doesn't
The two has to come out. Reduce harm.
create a safe transport system to reduce.
Reduces harm.
Create a safe transport system, reducing harm and improving health outcomes by targeting high risk areas.
Should it be improved rather than improving?
No, it's not all of it. It's not because I'm not above here in the
Get the
English
change in the step that you'll see.
classes as well. Right. Is that
Okay.
right?
Let's run with that
Okay,
at this stage.
we'll go with that at this stage.
Still think you can change the subheading from
The roads. You
The
say
safety.
roads.
Radio,
Safe.
yes.
I'll just do safe.
Safe roads.
Yes, safety.
Safe, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Just safe or safety?
Safety.
Safety, okay.
And that asset condition is an interesting one.
Right, we'll move on to the next one. We'll give that a tick at this stage, so. Sorry, Phil.
Just to observe that in asset condition, we use the term road network, and I'm just wondering if in consistency with the vision, if it should read transport system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than road
Okay.
networks, a transport system.
Yeah, we'll change that.
As a heading, you mean?
No, the sentence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that covers PT.
So we've got the same.
And stuff like that.
Prioritize. Rightio,
Doesn't have future focus there.
for purpose and.
Or should be now and in the future.
Well, it has everything on the bottom for future focus, sorry.
We need, oh, sorry, Murray, Ian.
We're moving on to, connectivity and choice.
Are we just at AS expedition, sorry?
Yes.
Ian, you. Hang on, sorry, okay, just.
Yeah, I've got something to interject here. So again, in your vision statement, we talked about resilient, and the challenge with resilience is if we only focus at the asset, that's not enough. So we know in some areas that an event will overwhelm the asset. And so we need to ensure that we've got resilient communities, or communities that can recover quickly from events. So there's a choice, I think, for the committee to make around whether they change the title to resilience and go more broadly. And asset conditions certainly part of that. But the part of that for us as well is making sure that we've got enough suppliers and materials available to help recovery post-event where the asset's overwhelmed. Because we can't always have an asset that will be fully resilient.
It's more consistent also with your wording and the objectives now.
Okay.
So is that possibly going to come under the fourth, because we've made changes to the first statement, that fourth statement, the title for that possibly is going to change. So what you're talking about could potentially come under a sustainability heading for that fourth element.
Because we've changed that around on our visions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at the number 4 too, I was waiting to get there, but.
It's safe, resilient and sustainable is the wording now in the vision, isn't it? So you'd have. So for those that want to know, if you don't turn your mics off, there are only a limited number of people who can use them at once.
Okay. Because we have altered the vision, and this was associated with the vision on above, was it? So we have altered a few, how we view it. Do we need to? Okay.
So I'd get rid of the word prioritise. I'd say we'd maintain and renew the transport system to ensure it is resilient and fit for purpose now and in the future, which is more consistent with the new vision statement.
Maintain and renew.
Just put it, I'm just trying to remember what was exactly what we ended up with our vision. Our vision is a sustainability, we all sort of group that together, didn't we? A well-being, going up, resilient and sustainable.
Yeah.
Do we have to have a separate, well, I suppose we have to have a separate objective for both those? Or is it all under the one?
I think they're different.
Yeah. You want an environment? No, we'll be, I'm just moving, sorry, I'm jumping through to that fourth one, I was just reflecting, I need to look at that again, but we'll carry on down.
Yeah, so that's not quite right. It's and renew the transport system to maintain and renew the transport system to ensure it is fit for purpose. Sorry, Dean, you're doing very well.
Purpose and resilient. Right.
Comfortable.
Okay,
Accept that.
yes, anybody? We're all good. Murray,
We're into the next one now.
third one, yes.
So I'm just looking at, we've split communities and business in this one, where in the vision statement, we've made communities include business.
Yes.
And I just wonder whether we should be, maybe it should be people and communities as we had in the vision.
You kind of connect with that because a big part of Southland's economy is actually the tourist part, which are visitors, not necessarily people who are here as community members necessarily, or necessarily permanent members of our businesses. So yeah, there's kind of the people response kind of captures visitors, tourists coming into the region. And I'm just going to observe that, develop a range of, maybe the option is transport choices rather than travel choices. And the reason I say that is because that perhaps reflects the freight dimension of it as well, and not just moving people, but moving freight through transport rather than travel.
Yep. Quentin?
Yeah, it's just a little uncomfortable with the word develop. It feels a little bit, I would say plan and deliver rather than develop, because develop is neither planning nor delivery. I think it's important to separate those.
Okay.
I think the important here is connecting, and so it's probably the connect I would put at the start somewhere. I think it's in the wrong place, given it's one of our. It was an objective. We actually haven't got the word connectivity in the current form though. So I'm concerned about the heading. I think the next point in our vision now is sustainability, and I appreciate we're going to do that in the board. The fourth one here, but I think we need to make sure that this is connecting sensibly. Well, it's reflecting their vision well. And that one, this one's out of place slightly.
Yes. Hang on.
To overcome that issue, could, after transport, instead of choices, could you have connections, transport connections, and remove to connect at the end?
Good connectivity through transport choices is probably what I want.
And deliver
yeah.
Or writing that up in.
I just wonder, in terms of Quentin's suggestion around plan and deliver, whether we could use the word support arrange. Whether Quentin would be happy with that and the committee's happy with that.
Potentially, I think support is a little bit fluffy too. I mean, what we need to get in the business of planning and delivering. I'm more comfortable with that terminology. I just think, you know, it speaks to both the strategic approach, but planning, and the delivery, which is the challenge where around the financing and prioritization. So, yeah, probably more comfortable with that.
Okay. And Christine and Phil.
Yes, I had a wee bit of a difficulty with this because I think for the large part of the Southland province there's not a range of choice in terms of how they connect. I can make more sense of it. I think you mentioned about for transport options, you know, in terms of shifting product. But for the communities, there's never going to be a range of options across. So I'm just wondering how that reads to people out there when saying we're going to deliver a range of transport connections.
Yeah. I think that obviously from where you live, and there's different meanings to that. And I certainly agree to what you said there in regards to Southland Phil.
You know, I was just wondering, I think, Kate, you're saying that you wanted to connect earlier in that statement. Is that what I was understanding?
Well, they've sort of put it in, yeah.
So I was just wondering if you open with, you know, connect people and communities, if you open with that statement, connect people and communities by planning and delivering a range of transport choices.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Just going back, but how, from a point of, in regards to range, Christine, I'm just trying to work out how, because obviously, sorry.
Just
Bill,
responding,
sorry.
then just to note that.
Yeah.
This is reflective of what we aspire to in the future, not the limited thing we've got today necessarily.
Yes, I understand that, and that would provide a commitment to do something sooner than later around this, but it's probably isn't been evident so far today. Yeah, and if I add in the ability of business, I guess, to have a range of choices, maybe that will be okay.
I think Dean needs catch-up time.
Yeah, it's just getting that right. How's that look? He's got the next people on communities by planning and delivering a range of transport connections that are used by people.
No,
We got to get rid of the committee. Yeah.
I think just a reflection, you know, and I'm relatively comfortable with the changes, but it's evident both in the first one and the third one how the previous wording had responded to the government's priorities. You know, the Road to Zero and the Transport Choices program had both sort of come out in the wording here, and yeah, so it's probably good to try to be a bit more neutral in that.
There's right. Choices.
Yes.
Just wondering if having planning and delivery in there limits it to only the region of Otago and Southland, when we actually want that connectivity to think beyond just our region, because particularly if we think of freight in the South Island freight story, it's that connectivity that is outside of our region is really critical. Is planning and delivering too limiting?
You could.
Sorry, yep.
I think you could deal with that by going planning for and supporting delivery, because then it's not, the sector can deliver some stuff as well. We just have to have a system that enables that.
I take out range because that's covered in choices now. Like, yeah, and supporting delivery.
Range. Right. There.
And I'd take out supporting this, but delivering. Transport choices need to be efficient or effective, really. And be consistent.
Christine.
I guess we do have that in our vision. So all these objectives should align to the vision
Or somewhere along.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got. Offer.
It could be efficient or effective.
Connect people and communities by planning for this and supporting delivery of. It's not right there. Delivery of effective transport choices, right? Joe.
Just put your horse in there.
No. Just to maintain a reasonably cynical position, as we sit here doing this navel gazing exercise, I think we've got to actually bring it back to the spheres of influence that we actually have. And so you started about planning and supporting delivery of effective transport choices. Are we inviting the Board of Air New Zealand to come and sit with us, or Kiwi Rail? You know, there's a whole lot of things that are outside our specific area of interest. And we can have the nice flowery language and aspirations, but if they don't listen to us, we're wasting our time. Need to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah. We certainly do have like certainly around the South Island discussion, we're certainly talking with Kiwi Rail and all the rest. They seem to be quite a bit more interested in what's going on and turning up, aren't they? So, which is a good thing to see. But it's certainly critical to and for the future Yes, sure.
Just taking that comment on board, could you change it to just saying by planning, delivering, and advocating for an efficient and effective transport? Because you may not be able to change it, but you can advocate.
That would helps Jim's discussion. Okay, how's that look?
I do think the advocacy role is important.
That's what we're here for. Yeah.
I suppose the other side of, well, the support of that is that they're now looking at many of privately funded or alternative funding mechanisms for transport solutions. So I suppose that's where, yeah, advocating is probably important.
Okay. Yeah, move on to the next one while
Just the delivering is the one that sticks with me though, because I don't know that we fully control the delivery of transport choices.
Well, possibly, but if we're not delivering, then you know, going to the point of the previous speaker, we are just navel gazing. So if we don't focus on delivering the solutions, then you do wonder why we're here. But I mean, that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? That we've got to deliver the solutions.
yeah.
That's what we're about. Is
Yeah, well, that's
delivering
not,
it.
so we're taking
Understand.
responsibility. We need to be involved. I know someone else is doing the work, but if not, they've got their voice and there's an outcome, the main outcome. Right, I'm coming to the fourth one.
Just the sustainability.
Yep.
Delete environmental.
Environmental, because that's we're taking that out of vision. Right, people's thoughts. Oh, we've got the environmental. So
This one is specifically environmental sustainability. I don't know. I mean, the one just at a broader level, the one thing I did note was absent here was the financial sustainability. I wasn't, or the financial. I don't even want to call it sustainability in that respect, but yeah, the financial side of it's not reflected in any of these objectives, which is interesting. I don't know where the best place is.
in our vision, sustainability covers, we're sort of indicating cover most of. It's a bit broader, not just environmental. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So how do we put that into the word in there to bring some of those things into it?
Can we go back up to the current vision, Dean?
We covered it off in that respect, in the efficient and effective, that, well, no, probably not, but the well-beings as well. But I suppose, as I said at the beginning, I'm just conscious that we're not targeting probably the biggest challenge that we face is the shortfall of funding, and none of these really speak to that very strongly. I'm just trying to.
Is this the right objective to be dealing with it, or is there?
No, probably not. But are we set to 5 objectives, or is that just a self-imposed limit?
You can have as many as you like.
Okay.
The reality is,
well, if that's the case, yes. I think given. Yeah, I'd probably look to a financial focused objective then, a 6.
but can sustainability not actually be incorporated to facilitating and understanding, supporting responses that help meet
I suppose I think that in its own right, if we're to look at the big picture, and I'm sure I can probably hear Alexa in my ear as well, that, you know, this environmental or you know, climate change, it should be considered one of the big challenges. So I'm comfortable with it being an objective in its own right, and I don't really want it to be watered down.
So you're happy that you say the environmental sustainability should be still there, just as it is?
Well, look, I think that stands in its own right, and I do think environmental sustainability is, and even the way that was originally worded, I'm comfortable with. I'd hate that to get sort of lost in translation, so I'd focus more on a financial objective.
Well, the reality is it's all about finances, isn't it? You know, it's we don't actually have necessarily anything regarding future focus. We could probably bring in something, but the reality is it's all about the money. Who's going to pay for that? How do we bring it objective into that? So just sorry, just in regards, if we leave the environmental sustainability of that, we possibly could add another objective around financial. That's maybe what you're asking, Quinn. I've got a few questions here. So, okay.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yep.
I'm nervous about the environmental sustainability to the extent we've got targets mentioned in there, and I think we need to be really careful that we own the targets, and we're not necessarily going to own those targets. So that's what I've got a problem with that. I'm moved on whether we do one sustainability or environmental sustainability and perhaps intergenerational equity, which is future focused to an extent.
Could be. Oh, sorry, do you want the targets taken out and some aspirations or something?
It has to be something we own though. At the moment, the targets were really set in that last GPS, they're no longer set, and we don't own them, and we want this to.
Well, just change targets to emissions reduction.
Yeah, they meet improved environmental standards and emission reduction. Environmental outcomes. So it has to meet. It's not meeting. It's
and reduces emissions rather than because that might
reduce emissions.
Okay, Phil, you might have something more with.
I'm just going to observe, you know, essentially these objectives are kind of establishing the design attributes for our long-term transport system. Any one of these existing attributes has got a financial implication associated with it. You know, finance runs through each one of these 5. So I'm just wondering if it is useful to have a separate standalone finance-focused objective, or if it's better to just understand it that it's embedded in all of these. There's going to be financial implications for connectivity and choice, future focus, etc.
I suppose what I'm trying to get at it was that, you know, having an objective that sort of seeks to, you know, to cover off some of those things like the alternative funding mechanisms and funding approaches that seem to be a bit flavour of the day at the moment. At the moment, there's nothing that's pointing us towards finding new ways or better ways to pay for the shortfall in infrastructure that we have. So just trying to give some space.
Okay, Murray.
Yeah,
I suppose the flip side of that is you could argue that you could, you know, ensure proactive responses to changes and challenges. The changes and challenges are currently, you know, financial. So maybe that is covered in future focus.
Yeah, we'll just hear Murray. Murray, go for it.
Yeah, I'd just like to propose an alternative. I'd call this sustainability, and the wording that I'm suggesting would be ensure the transport system continues to be environmentally and financially sustainable, because particularly in the environmental area, different governments assign quite a bit of difference to the priorities in the environmental area. So it needs to be enough to cover 30 years, remember? So that would align it with the vision statement, but not tie us down too much, but keep it in front of us and allow us as staff to consider it when we're doing our asset management plans.
It sounds very simplistic, but it was reasonably effective too. So what's people's thoughts?
Do you want
Any interest in what Murray? Do we start working with all the bits?
the only word that possibly may not be completely correct is the ensure, but that's the best word I can think of. So if you like, I'll repeat it. Ensure the transport system continues to be environmentally and financially sustainable.
Under sustainability.
Yeah.
Taking the environment.
I think continues. I have some difficulty with continues because I don't think it is sustainable currently. So
just system
So instead of could
is.
Yeah.
It's just we want it to be.
What I'm thinking about, and I think Phil mentioned it earlier, what we build now, we don't want to build like they have in some other parts of the world, build flash highways in the middle of a jungle that we are never going to be able to afford to maintain or sustain. Those sorts of things, but the same applies in the environmental area. But we don't want to get into too much detail.
I'm sure the transport, Christine.
I'm just agreeing with Phil's comment that the financial element goes across all of these rather than looking at an individual element. If we just looked at that individual, we may not be able to do any of those other things.
There's expectations, any of these environmental outcomes and to reduce emissions, that you mustn't have all the financial. That would go hand in hand, hopefully. But then again, from the point of as different governments come along, they might focus on the environment. They will sway. We need to make sure we're covered clearly.
Murray's was environmental and financially sustainable, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think they need to articulate both of those in their thing, and I agree. Continues just gets in the way. It's just an unnecessary debate point.
Actually, is.
Yeah.
Transport to be or is to be.
So it's environmentally and financially sustainable.
Yeah, Chad.
Just as another suggestion, I think freight is kind of hidden in those, and I know safety and resilience is a key part of that, and obviously alternate freight routes and choices. And I'm just wondering whether some sort of freight movement objective is required, like infrastructure that enables the productive movement of freight, because it's important obviously to both of our economies. And I feel that's missing from the current list. It seems to be inherent but not clear.
My argument would be that that's covered in a transport system, but I think if you went to freight, you would then have to go to lots of other, tourism, for instance, or whatever. Do we list them all, or do we just take them all as part of a system?
I mean, I would say tourism could fit under the connectivity and choice.
Yeah.
Whereas I think freight is just not called out.
But it is only one part of our transport system. I was just saying it should be covered under that. Would have thought.
You could connect people, produce, and communities by planning, delivering, and advocating for effective.
Yeah, we need it in there, I think. So.
Product in there rather than saying freight or produce.
We need some business.
I think produce is too narrow because there's lots of other economic drivers other than produce. So.
Because we've already in the the first statement, we've made communities cover business and freight and those sorts of things. So if we start sort of getting too detailed in that area, we're going to have to change our vision statement.
I mean, I just say, you know, choices sort of implies mode shift and things like that. In my mind, yeah, I just think that freight wording or there needs to be something there around product freight.
We haven't got the product at all.
There's no covered in there.
I mean, the reality is we are a hugely export region too, from the point that it is the produce and so
Goods. People, goods and communities. That's, I mean, if you put the word goods in there, it means it's, you just get the trucks with the out people, and every other type of business relates to people really.
You could use the word services rather than goods, because services would cover goods, but it's more broad.
I don't care about the internet gaming world, but that's okay. I get where you come from.
sorry, Jim.
Can I just go back to Quinton's comments around us talking about the financials? The bottom line is we have to realise we are the runt of the litter. 80% of the votes are now in the North Island, and we're going to have to scrape and fight for every single cent that comes our way.
There's no question. I think that's reinforces my point. I think that's the biggest problem we have is that if we like I said, if we continue to fall short, then we're going to result in certainly something that's not efficient or effective. And you know, I mean, I think, you know, I've been thinking quite a lot about this through the spatial plan and all that sort of stuff. Going, well, we can't accept level of service F as being a suitable outcome for our transport network, and identifying risks and challenges in the, you know, the projects, like saying, well, what happens if we don't deliver this project? It's not just about, you know, it's so easy to just for the central government to draw a line under something and prioritize something in front of us because it's more important, but unless you sort of identify what happens if you don't and that the network fails, then you know, they don't see that. All they'd see is an opportunity to save some money. So
Got a couple more quick. You bring up
I mean, it's an interesting example of that. Sorry, and I'll just expand on this. An interesting example of this is we've had some data through Destination Queenstown recently that says that the level of community acceptance of international tourism has declined to below 20%, so 18% or something. So, and I would suggest that that's a direct correlation to people's experiences in the transport network, and whether rightly or wrongly, they're blaming international tourism for that impact. Now, that clearly has a flow-on effect in terms of our economy. In the biggest GDP earner in the Queenstown Lakes district is directly impacted by the levels of service experienced by the community in the transport network.
Can I just go back to your freight? I'm just trying to understand the services cover that. You know, that I mean, as in where we do talk about freight a lot on our transport systems, not necessarily services. So I'm just trying to, I like for me, services doesn't rock, but Phil.
Yeah, well, I was gonna speak the same topic that, you know, because I get services from my accountant in the Manawa too, but I don't rely on any transport networks to obtain those services. But I was wondering if goods was a more appropriate word, because it has connotations of something in a box or package being moved somewhere.
Yes. Okay, was Christine? Yeah, Mark,
So I'm just back to the next one, I think just change that to taking out the environmental sustainability, so that's good. I'm uncomfortable with the word ensure. Yeah, I think we can plan to have the transport system environmentally and financially sustainable, and I'm not sure transport by its nature is environmentally friendly anyway. I think we can do our best around that, but we can't ensure it.
Okay.
I'm not sure the right word, I didn't have the solution to that, but it was just ensure is a tough word to meet.
Just keep moving on. Murray, have you got?
Yeah, just further to the discussion about the financial sustainability, I think that was put up by Quentin. So the financial sustainability in that statement ensures, well, maybe not ensures, but requires the transport system owners to collect and provide evidence to support the combating the issues that Jim was talking about before, about that small amount of the difficulty for us to get funding for our networks. So I think that's a critical part of that financial sustainability, is to continue with that collecting of evidence and putting decent business cases towards achieving that.
Sorry, I was going to touch on that word ensure because it's been brought up a few times, but what if it's more about commit to making the transport system environmentally and financially sustainable? Because that we're not there, we know that, but you can still commit to it.
Yeah. Okay, I know. So it'll be quite a good word. It means we put it aside. You've got to keep on looking ahead, getting there. Okay.
I think that this sustainability could be future focused and combine the two together and then put them further up above connected, potentially to reflect better our new vision. If we talked about now and in the future, it meets all of those other things then.
So what do you want to do then? Just in
Well,
regards to-
you could, I put long-term sustainability, probably, and incorporate some of the words or the future focused bit into this. I'm just putting it out. I haven't got a solution. I'm saying let's condense this down.
Doesn't sustainability indicate that it's long-term?
Not necessarily.
So we're keeping long term? Yeah.
I think that confuses the future focus bit, because the future focus implies long term. Sustainability is just ensuring that it's sustainable. So I think they're separate things.
Okay.
So reasonably comfortable with the two who we've dealt with there. And then we look at the future focused. Thanks, Phil.
Just perhaps wondering if opportunity needs to be added to change, challenges and opportunity.
You never know what the government's going to come out with. Yeah. Grab the money opportunities. Anybody? Any thoughts on that? Yeah, just in regards, so we won't be worried about the funding when they take that out of the system, because we've sort of covered that. Or do you, where do we?
It
sorry, I'm just.
It doesn't make us look at other forms of funding. in the sustainability report, maybe it does. I think we need to make sure that we're looking at all opportunities for funding. Presumably they are going to be sustainable, but it's whether we want to have a way of looking in the sustainability one at a broader.
Cool.
Just quickly wondering if there's an opportunity to attend to that in the next level down with 10-year target headlines by adding some metrics around some of those. Is there an opportunity to make it really evident and clear that you are pursuing funding in whatever form and shape?
More close to home, and so in.
I think this is a good opportunity because you're doing work as an RTC around your 30-year sort of vision and strategy, but there's also some work with the South Island RTC chairs, and there's a really good, you could nudge that into here to say we're going to commit to that and be part of the bigger freight studies and other bits and pieces. So I don't know how you'd word it, but I'm just thinking there's a.
I think that's a 10-year bit, possibly, rather,
Okay.
That's one part of the jigsaw. Yeah.
I think long term we see from there that we will be. I'll probably have to agree with you. Just probably makes sense that we won't be doing. When we do it, it'll be for a long term focus. I don't know how you'd. Looking at South Island as a whole, the transport network, because we are doing a lot of work in regards to that.
Just so on that, the interesting thing, if you went back to Kiwi Rail's presentation of the chairs, was that they are looking to be, if the ports start to skip, they want to pick up between the ports skipping. So there's something around this. If you just ended up focusing on Otago Southland, now you'd miss the bigger South Island picture and opportunity.
Is it within Otago?
Well, that goes back to the first point where we talked about, at some stage about regionally and nationally.
Interesting if you.
Sorry, Hartley wanted to say something.
So yeah, it was just with the sustainability, unless I missed it earlier. I think you can be around the long-term aspect. You can be sustainable for the next 2 to 3 years. Doesn't mean you're going to be sustainable for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
So we're worried about the short-term sustainability or something, or the long-term sustainability, or getting to a position where long-term we are sustainable. So just,
Personally, whatever we do, we have to, it'd be a very silly to have a short-term focus on any of this because we're dealing with the same situations. Should have been sorted 30, 40, 50 years ago, not thinking long enough out. Now we're left holding the baby, so got to look long-term, make sure it's right.
Just make a comment around that future focus and putting the opportunities in there. Allows us to work, for example, through the chairs for the South Island kind of focus and take advantage of anything that might come up that we don't know about at the moment.
So you're saying the opportunities covers that?
Yeah.
Not like, okay.
Oh, just going to say, is the word our regions rather than that regions? Essentially.
Not regions. Our regions. Could you put in there
within the South Island,
like the future focus that working on
and the South Island
our
context.
regions and
South Island context?
South Island context.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I do feel that the South Island discussion should be, because we are having, I believe it's working really effective, and more so into the future as they're with Kiwi Rail and etc. Murray.
In the future focused statement, I think there should be some wording about recognising the opportunities, because we just thinking back in terms of the likes of the R funding and more recently the targeted funding to recover some of the low cost, low risk type opportunities, being on the lookout for those and being having the agility or flexibility to take to be able to take up some of those opportunities. They're sort of critical. And if we haven't got that flexibility, if we don't recognise it in the first place, we're not going to make a response. But if we haven't got the flexibility or agility in our budgets or whatever, or if we're slow, we're going to miss out to the early adopters for often very limited offers or opportunities that crop up. So just a thought that because they do crop up reasonably regularly.
Thank you. What bothered me a bit was the proactive word of responses to changes, because if you don't know what the changes are, how can you be proactive to it? But is it more around ensuring an agile response or something along those lines?
Agility to respond.
To respond more than.
Just going back to the Southland context, I think that's like to have it in here is indicating to the rest of the region we want to work together here. You know, we understand that. It's probably quite a good position to be, to have that in our wording too.
Yeah, so I'm going to push back a little bit, because I actually reckon there is greater opportunity to be proactive, to be forward thinking, future mapping, and connecting with what are the signals we're receiving. I actually think there is an opportunity to be proactive, which will build and contribute to agility. But yeah, I think it's proactive reminds us that there's an obligation to be forward thinking.
So how about position our regions in the South Island to be proactive and agile to respond? Don't need to ensure. Gosh, you're doing well, Dean. Have to say, he deserves his first serving of lunch today.
So we're just reading that when we talk about our regions, we're actually talking about all the regions in the South Island there, not just Southland Otago. Is that the way we wanted that? Or are we looking at our regions in the South Island context?
To be.
I think it's our regions, because it's the Otago South and Regional Plan Transport Plan. So.
No, that's saying our regions in the South Island.
Our regions, maybe it's common in the South Island.
Can we say we live in the South Island here? It's all of our region. I'm just trying to comment. Is that?
But comma would get rid of the context.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, that's.
I'm just reading it, I think.
The word context. Sorry, it would give the context without the need.
Can't talk on behalf of the
context.
Yeah. Okay. How does that look? Position regions.
If you had to position our regions, comma, in the South Island, comma, to be proactive.
Yeah. Okay.
Takes out the need for context.
You've got an English teacher here.
No.
No.
I failed miserably in 74.
Plus 33 English, it's not English, didn't have much.
See how the classroom more.
Okay, does that look a little better? Yeah, that would. We're not having context, is that right? Yeah.
Some might suggest we have no choice. I mean, that's obvious. We can't position it anywhere other than
yes,
South
I
Island.
see.
So that's what the context sort of speaks to.
Okay, yeah, sorry, yes.
That need to collaborate with the other regions.
Okay, they are bringing.
I wonder if you need the context really, because the position our regions, it allows you to, to involve the South Island if you wish, or just if it's just related to South of Otago, then that would be.
And the opportunities are working with the South Island context anyway, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just, I'm quite impressed that we do it as two regions. Maybe you guys are so used to this, because it's good for us as Otago Southland to do this together, and also the mindset of the trip starts here. The trip doesn't start in Auckland and gets to us. So we should change our mindset that some of the goods that we produce here, it starts here on the farm, on a small farm track, onto a unsealed road, onto a sealed road, onto the highway, and even to the point of it doesn't just go to Auckland, it gets from the bluff onto a boat that goes internationally as well. So it's good that we have that South Island context there, but it's wider, it's more than just that. Why I say just.
If I can add that a lot of the produce, like from a farming aspect, fertiliser, the things we need come from elsewhere to get to our farms before we, in theory, we produce. And also when you look at our supermarket, most of the food doesn't come from Christchurch overnight. Like everything sort of seems to come down to us. Oh, I'm not disagreeing, it does. But there is aspects that there's certainly inputs have to be brought down. So it does work both ways. But I do understand the product starts here as such. But so I probably feel it's a bit more both ways as well, just as important. So are we happy with that?
It is a good start for
Okay.
referring to them.
Sleep on it. Okay. Yep.
Well, in fact, that's we've got quite through the looked at the headline targets, but I think that you've actually given us sufficient good stuff there to actually go away now as a tag and do some work on headline targets and perhaps bring it back to a separate the next meeting.
Yeah.
Because that flows through there are next steps from that.
Yeah.
And let us do some background work for us. So the high level stuff we can actually, to a large extent, pin down now. And we can take that away and give some more serious thought to how that transposes, down into the things that we're going to measure and how we go about measuring them, which are under the headline targets, etc.
So just looking ahead, obviously, this does take time to work through that. There's no harm in that. Will you could show changes from what we've just done to some of this stuff, just to give an indicator of how it would, the next steps, the 10 years and is that what you're expecting? You can.
Yes. Yeah.
So having that might speed things up too, just to have a look.
And we'll bring that back to a future meeting.
Yep.
Because we'll no doubt talk about it this afternoon, but I think that there's only a certain number of months left before the election. But we do need to have another meeting of this committee before that, somewhere probably in late July or potentially early August. We won't necessarily be asking you to make huge decisions that might become controversial in terms of the local government elections. However, you do need to be at that stage. We need to have sufficient time to be able to collate that information and the data that Councillor Menzies was talking about, to put that information in front of you so that you can see where things or how things are happening and how things are tracking. That information gets loaded into the system after the end of June and about the first 2 weeks of June. So by the time that it's collated and turned into something that's of value for you guys to look at rather than spreadsheets of numbers, probably towards the end of July, and we should be able to have something more in terms of this as well by that time.
That sounds good.
Look, thanks, Russell. I've got huge confidence the staff can get this to us. I think the one thing that I'll be really pushing, and what I really like is the process today's got us, is probably looking at the alternative funding, or at least alternative methods of getting better outcomes, and that would be things like pipelines of work and things like that. And so I'm really, I know we haven't got as far as you wanted us to go possibly, but I think that the better context now that we can, this is all talking to a previous GPS really, which isn't necessarily giving us the best outcomes for this area. And I think that we're much better set up to thinking about pipelines, thinking about funding models, and certainly what are the real issues. Even mode shift should have been mode choice rather than Yeah.
So I think that the aim of, said at the start, the aim of the exercise to try and make our RLTPs less GPS specific.
Yeah.
So that they can so that at least the RLTP will allow responses to a GPS, that at the end of the day, the GPS is primarily around setting the government's priorities for funding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just going to put it out here, and I don't think it's a conversation this afternoon, but we're having really good discussions at South Island shares. The biggest issue in the South Island, doesn't matter where you are, is the lack of investment by population base. That's something we all share. And I think if we really want to come out with a story that the government can bank, we need to tell that collectively. And I'm just putting it out there that perhaps it's not just a Otago Southland Regional Land Transport Plan, it is a South Island Regional Land Transport Plan. And what we could be doing in the interim is talking to the other councils about whether there's a wish that we don't spend a whole lot of time rewording words at the front end, but have the database at the back that really shows that pipeline to resilience and the productivity. It's going to work with every government. We've got a problem in the South Island all about numbers. And I'm just, I don't know where that time is, but I don't want to do it in a public meeting really per se, putting it out there and how we can help and support each part of our South Island to tell that story that's compelling.
Russell, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You've introduced the South Island story, and the South Island story is something that is in the process of being finalised, or has been finalised by the South Island RTC Chairs Group at their last meeting, where they asked for a number of changes to be made to the document, which has resulted in it having to go back and be reformatted. And I'd hope that we would actually have it here for you today. It will be released in the not too distant future, and it creates an overall picture for the South Island that what you've got here now builds on, and will link to. So our RLTPs will link to that transport story, and the transport story to South Island level will certainly be something that is easy to take to the government and talk about the needs of the South Island in terms of freight, in terms of rail, in terms of people, in terms of tourism.
At the same time as in Steppy. Is that what the chair, are you going to be talking about that under the chair's report today, or under South Island?
I will mention it today, but I had hoped that the minutes of that meeting actually arrived on Friday.
Yeah.
So they haven't actually been checked to say that they're, so I can't say, I couldn't circulate them before this meeting. We'll circulate them as probably the end of next week once they've all been looked at.
Yeah, I was going to say that. We've got an item where we can talk about maybe some of the discussions and things. I'll tell you, because it was not excluded or anything in regards to how, even just from the point of, Simon Bridges turning up wanting to have a yarn, which they wouldn't usually be doing this. But it's obviously the importance of that structure. So it's good to see actually. So
Simon is the chair of the NZTA board, just to answer that. The minister didn't quite make it.
No, he had other issues dealing with. Yes. So look, thanks for all that. But it does take a bit of time working through, but it's hugely important. So we'll just pull that on the workshop, and then we'll have some lunch and back at 1 o'clock, is it? Yes, I didn't make it. There we go. Cheers.